My name's Mark. I'm 41. Built my life from nothing. And almost lost it all because of the woman I thought I'd grow old with. It's not easy to talk about this. I'm not the kind of guy who usually shares personal stuff. I keep things to myself, handle my business, and move forward. That's how I was raised. Work hard. Don't complain. Take care of your own. But when your life flips upside down because of someone you trusted more than anyone, it sticks in your chest. It stays there. And sometimes the only way to breathe again is to finally talk about it. I wasn't born into much. Small town in Ohio. Dad was a mechanic. Mom worked wherever she could, cleaning offices, babysitting, sometimes 2 jobs at once. There were no vacations, no name-brand shoes, no safety net. But I learned how to grind. I learned that if you wanted something, you had to go out and earn it. No one was handing it to you. I started working young, paper routes, mowing lawns, whatever I could. I didn't go to college. I went straight to the job site, learned how to build, how to fix, how to sell. Eventually, I saved enough to buy a rundown duplex, fixed it up on weekends, rented it out, then bought another. By the time I hit my 30s, I had my own small real estate business, a few solid properties, and enough cash to feel stable. Not rich, not flashy, but solid. That's when I met Elena. She was a little younger than me, in her late 20s, working at this art supply store downtown. We crossed paths at a coffee shop one morning. I remember she had paint on her hands and didn't even care. She smiled, made a joke about it, and before I knew it, we were sitting at the same table, talking like we'd known each other for years. She was smart, thoughtful, gentle. She didn't ask about my money or what I drove. She asked what kind of kid I was, what I missed about being younger, stuff like that. And I don't know. Maybe I was just tired of always having to be the guy with a plan, but I let my guard down with her. We got married about 2 years after that, bought a house together, one of mine, actually, and turned it into a home. Elena had an eye for details. She made every room feel warm. It was the kind of place you wanted to come back to. Then Mason was born, our son. Everything changed the day he came into the world. He's 9 now, and I still remember the first time I held him. This tiny, wrinkly little human, completely dependent on us. I'd never felt more afraid and more proud at the same time. That day, I promised myself I'd give him the kind of life I never had. A life with stability, with love. And I thought Elena wanted that too. She stopped working after Mason came, said she wanted to stay home and raise him full-time. I told her she didn't have to ask. I'd take care of everything. I worked hard to make sure she didn't have to. She always had what she needed. I never let money be a reason to say no to her. We weren't perfect, sure. No couple is. I worked a lot. Real estate doesn't run itself, and when you've got employees depending on you, bills, taxes, contractors missing deadlines, it adds up. But I always made time for them, for my family. I really believed we were strong. But over the last year, something started to shift. There's only so long you can hold it all in. I don't know what I thought would happen. Maybe that the system would see through her lies on its own. That the truth would somehow just rise to the surface without me needing to get my hands dirty. But it doesn't work like that. Not when someone's actively trying to bury you. The day I hit my limit didn't look like much on the surface. It was a Tuesday, cloudy, nothing unusual. I had just gotten off a call with my lawyer. We'd gone over another affidavit her team submitted. A long, padded-out list of grievances. I was dismissive, unavailable, financially manipulative. They even tried to twist a canceled family trip, one we skipped because Mason had the flu, into an example of me controlling her movement. I hung up, walked into the kitchen, and found her sitting at the table with her laptop open. She was smiling, typing, probably to him. I stood there for a minute, just watching, and something cracked. "You've taken this too far," I said. She didn't even look up. "I don't know what you're talking about. You've lied to our friends. You've lied in court. You tried to get me thrown out of this house. You dragged CPS into this. You made our son feel like he had to choose between us." She closed the laptop slowly, finally looked at me. "I'm doing what I have to do," she said calmly. "No, you're doing what you want to do," I said. "You're trying to win." She leaned back in the chair, crossed her arms. "You're just mad I won't make it easy for you." That was it. That was the moment I let go of every last hope I had that she might turn back into the person I once loved. I walked into my office, closed the door, and opened a folder I hadn't touched since this all started. Inside were notes, receipts, dates, names. The private investigator I hired had given me more than I'd ever needed, not just photos, but timelines, phone records, even voice recordings. I hadn't used them yet. My lawyer advised against it early on, said it could make things uglier, that maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe we could settle. But I was done waiting for reason. I sent everything to my lawyer, every file, every timestamped image, every word she'd whispered to Danny when she thought no one else could hear. Let her play the victim in court. I had the truth in my hands now. A few days later, we were back in front of a judge. Custody hearing. She walked in confident, beige blazer, neat bun, soft makeup. Played the same character, the patient mother, the one just trying to protect her child from the big, bad husband. But that day, the story changed. Because we came in with everything. My lawyer laid it out step by step. The affair, the hotel visits, the CPS claim that went nowhere, the staged, emotional abuse narrative, the digital evidence tying her to every lie. We had witnesses, statements, a full picture of what really happened, and how far she'd gone to rewrite the truth. She looked pale by the end of it. For the first time, I saw her facade slip. And for the first time in months, I breathed. We weren't done yet. The judge didn't rule that day, but the air had changed. The momentum had shifted, and she knew it. When we walked out of the courtroom, I didn't even look back at her, because I didn't need to anymore. I wasn't playing defense now. I was taking my life back, piece by piece. She got distant, quiet. There were moments when she'd be in the same room but feel a million miles away. She started guarding her phone more. Not in an obvious way at first, but little things. Turning it over when it buzzed. Smiling at something, then saying it was nothing. Always having some excuse to run errands alone. I'm not a jealous man. Never have been. I believe in trust. But that feeling, the one in your gut that tells you something's off, it started creeping in. And once it's there, it's hard to ignore. I asked her if everything was okay. She said she was just tired. That motherhood had worn her down. That maybe she just needed some space. And I believed her, because why wouldn't I? But the distance kept growing. And even though I didn't want to admit it, even though I told myself I was overthinking things, I knew something was wrong. After that feeling settled into my gut, I tried to shake it. I really did. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I was stressed from work and seeing things that weren't there, that Elena had been a good wife, a loving mother, and maybe she just needed time. Maybe I needed to back off a little, but backing off didn't help. If anything, things got weirder. She stopped making eye contact when we talked, started giving one-word answers. We'd sit at the dinner table, me, her, and Mason, and I could tell her mind was somewhere else. Like she was just waiting for the meal to be over so she could get back to whatever was pulling her away from us. Then there was her phone, always with her, even in the bathroom. If I asked her to hand it to me for something, like to check a message or look up directions, she'd hesitate, like it was loaded with secrets. Once, I saw her delete a whole thread right in front of me before showing me what I asked for. She laughed it off, said it was just junk mail. That's when I started noticing the gym visits. Elena had always worked out off and on, but suddenly she was going every day, sometimes twice. She bought new leggings, a fancy water bottle, Bluetooth headphones, little things, but all at once. She said she wanted to feel better about herself, said she was tired of feeling like just a mom. I supported her, of course. I wanted her to feel confident, but something felt off. She started wearing makeup to the gym, full face, even lipstick. She'd come back flushed, distracted, never made much conversation after. One night, I asked how her workout went, and she just shrugged and said, "Fine," then went straight to the shower. I started watching more carefully after that. One Saturday, she said she was going to meet a friend for coffee. No big deal. I stayed home with Mason, played video games, made sandwiches. A few hours passed, then 4, then 5. She finally came home and said her friend had to leave early, but she decided to walk around the park and clear her head. Something about that didn't sit right. So, yeah, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her location on the shared iPad we use for Mason's school apps. She didn't know it was still logged into her iCloud. I opened the Find My app. That day, she hadn't been anywhere near the park. She'd been across town, at a smoothie bar next to a gym I'd never heard her mention before. I stared at that blinking blue dot for a long time. My heart was racing. I didn't want to believe what it was telling me, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next day, I drove by that gym, just to see. It was one of those trendy places, small, boutique style, full of young people in matching outfits, smiling like life was one big photo shoot. I parked across the street and waited. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. Then I saw her. She came out of the gym, laughing, hair pulled up, cheeks red, still wearing her workout clothes. But it wasn't the gym that got me. It was him. A guy came out right behind her, tall, maybe mid-20s, athletic build. The kind of guy who knows he looks good and expects everyone else to notice too. He reached out, touched her shoulder just lightly, and she didn't pull away. They stood close. Too close. He handed her something, looked like a protein bar, and she smiled like he just gave her a gift. And then she hugged him. It wasn't long, maybe 2 seconds. But it said everything I didn't want to hear. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I needed time to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. But in that moment, sitting in my truck across the street from that perfect little gym, I felt something inside me shift. This wasn't just in my head. Something was happening, and I had to know the truth, all of it. After that day outside the gym, I couldn't keep pretending. I spent the next couple nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling while Elena slept next to me. I could hear her breathing, calm and steady, like nothing in the world was wrong. And I just kept thinking, who are you, really? I wanted to believe it was innocent. A friendship. Maybe. A misunderstanding. But that feeling in my gut, it was still there. Stronger now. Heavier. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to a guy I used to use for background checks and business deals. Discreet guy. Ex-cop. Not cheap, but good. I told him I needed to know if my wife was seeing someone. I didn't give many details. He didn't ask. He just said, give me a few days. Those few days were brutal. I went through the motions at work, answered emails, took calls, but I wasn't really there. At home, I tried to act normal around Mason, played games with him, helped with homework, read his favorite comic books at night like always. But my mind kept drifting. Elena acted the same. Still distracted, still distant. She barely looked me in the eye anymore. Said she was just tired, like she always did. I think part of me wanted her to confess on her own, to sit me down and tell me the truth. But she didn't. And then, on a Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the investigator. Got what you asked for. Sending now. I stepped out of my office and opened the message in the stairwell. My hands were already shaking. There were pictures. One of Elena's sitting in her car in a parking lot, gym clothes, hair pulled back, that same water bottle in her hand. A few minutes later, the same young guy, the one I saw outside the gym, walked up, got in on the passenger side. They sat there together for over an hour. There were more. Them walking into a hotel lobby. Him with his hand on the small of her back. Her laughing, looking up at him like a teenager with a crush. And then the two of them leaving 3 hours later. Same clothes. Different expressions. Her face looked light, relaxed, like she just spent the afternoon at a spa. I stood there for a long time, staring at those pictures. I felt frozen, like my brain had left my body and I was just watching myself exist. And I don't know how long I stayed there, 5 minutes, maybe 15. But when I finally moved, it was like something broke open inside me. Not just sadness, not just anger. It was something deeper. This is real. I'd known it. Deep down, I'd known it for weeks. But now I had proof. Now I couldn't explain it away. That night, I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Mason had a school project to finish, and I didn't want him to see anything was wrong. So I waited. The next day, I printed the photos, put them in an envelope. I waited until after dinner. Elena had just tucked Mason into bed. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she came downstairs, phone in hand, probably texting him. I watched her walk across the room like I was watching a stranger. When she looked up and saw me, something in her face changed. Like she knew. I slid the envelope across the table. She looked at it, then at me. What's this? Open it. She did. Slowly. Pulled out the photos. Looked at them one by one. Her face didn't change. When she finished, she set them down gently, took a deep breath, and then she said, I guess there's no point lying now. That was it. No shock. No apology. No emotion. Just the truth. Cold. Simple. Final. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. Just sat there, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the envelope like she was waiting for me to do something, say something. I think she expected me to yell, or throw something, or break down, but I didn't do any of that. I just sat across from her and stared. I couldn't even feel my own hands. My body was there, but my head was somewhere else entirely, somewhere colder. How long? I finally asked. She looked up, met my eyes. A few months, she said. Who is he? She hesitated. Just a guy at the gym. That answer made me want to laugh. Just a guy. Like that made it smaller, less real, less damaging. Just a guy. Like this whole thing wasn't tearing our family in half. His name? Elena. My voice dropped. His name? Danny, she said. Danny. Of course it was something simple. Young, short name. No weight to it. Just Danny. I nodded slowly. Took another breath. My chest felt tight, like someone had strapped a belt across it. Are you in love with him? I asked. She paused again. Too long. Then shrugged. I don't know. And that was somehow worse than a yes. I stood up. I couldn't sit there anymore. I walked into the hallway, then the living room, then just stood there staring at the wall like it could explain something to me. I heard her in the kitchen, the creak of the chair, her glass being filled with water. A few minutes later, she walked past me and went upstairs like we hadn't just had that conversation. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in Mason's room, on the floor beside his bed, listening to the sound of his breathing. He looked peaceful, safe, untouched by all of this. I kept thinking, how do I protect him from this? How do I keep this from breaking him, too? In the morning, Elena acted normal. She made breakfast, poured coffee, asked me if Mason had clean socks for school. Like nothing happened. Like she hadn't admitted to cheating on me just 12 hours earlier. It was almost worse than fighting. Her calmness, her indifference. She didn't say sorry. Not once. Didn't try to explain. Didn't offer anything unless I asked. It was like she was already out the door in her mind, and her body just hadn't followed yet. Over the next few days, we barely spoke. She slept in the guest room. We kept up appearances for Mason, still ate dinner together, still helped him with homework. But between us, it was just silence. Dead, heavy silence. I caught her texting him once in the hallway. She didn't even try to hide it, just turned her body slightly and kept typing. I walked past without saying a word. I didn't have the energy to fight. Not yet. I was still trying to process what this meant. 13 years together. 9 of those married. A child. A house. A whole life. And she threw it all away for Danny from the gym. There were moments I thought maybe I'd forgive her. That we could try therapy, or take some time apart, or whatever couples are supposed to do when things fall apart. But then I'd remember her face at that table, the way she looked at those photos like they were just paperwork. Like this was some business transaction she'd already signed off on. That wasn't the face of someone who wanted to fix things. That was the face of someone already gone. And still, I hadn't even begun to understand just how ugly things were going to get. Because finding out about the affair, that was just the beginning. The real damage? That came later. For a while, we didn't talk about divorce out loud. I think I was still hoping, deep down, that she'd come to her senses. That maybe there was still a version of Elena in there who would see what she was destroying and stop before it went too far. But that hope died slowly, piece by piece, every time I caught her smiling at her phone or coming home later than she said she would. Then one night, about a week after she admitted everything, she brought it up. I was sitting on the porch after putting Mason to bed, just staring out at the backyard. It was dark. The air was still. I heard the screen door open behind me and then close. She didn't sit down, just stood behind me and said, real calm, we should talk about what happens next. I already knew what she meant. You want a divorce? I asked, without turning. She didn't answer right away. Then, I think it's best. I nodded once. That was all I gave her. She didn't say she was sorry, didn't say she wished things were different. She just stood there, waiting, like she wanted me to handle the next steps. Like I always did. But I didn't. Not this time. You talked to a lawyer yet? I asked. No, not yet. She was lying. I could tell. Her voice had that distant, rehearsed tone she always used when she'd already made a decision but didn't want to own it yet. Like she was softening the blow to protect herself, not me. I didn't push it. Not that night. But the next morning, I made a call. I'd never needed a lawyer for anything personal before. My guy handled business contracts, leases, stuff like that. But I asked him to refer me to someone who dealt with divorce. Someone sharp. He sent me a name, and I booked a consultation the same week. I didn't want this to get ugly. At first, I just wanted to protect Mason. I didn't care about punishing her or dragging it out. But something in my gut told me I needed to be careful. That Elena wasn't going to be the person I used to know in that courtroom. And I was right. It started small. She asked if she could keep the house for stability. Said it would be better for Mason if he didn't have to move. I told her I was open to discussing that, depending on custody, timing, and what was fair. She didn't like that answer. Then came the talk about money. She said she deserved half of everything. I reminded her, calmly, that we had a prenup, signed and notarized. She rolled her eyes and said it was barely enforceable. I started seeing the shift. The woman who once cared about our little family, who used to cry at sappy movies and kiss Mason's forehead every night, was gone. In her place was someone colder, strategic. Like this wasn't our life we were splitting. It was a negotiation. One day she said, "You're going to make this harder than it has to be, aren't you?" I looked at her and said, "I'm going to protect what's mine. That includes my son." That's when her face changed. She didn't say anything, just stared at me like she was trying to figure out how far I'd go. I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not sadness, not regret, something else. That's the moment I realized this wasn't going to be civil. She didn't just want out. She wanted it all, and she was going to try to take it. The first warning didn't come from my lawyer. It came from my friend Alex. "Hey man, is everything okay?" he asked over the phone. His voice had that cautious tone people get when they're not sure how deep they should step in. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Why?" "I saw Elena yesterday," he said. "She was at that coffee shop downtown with someone. She looked off, told me things at home have been really tense, that she feels overwhelmed, said you've been putting a lot of pressure on her." I didn't say anything right away, because I knew exactly what was happening. She was starting to flip the script, not just in private, not just between us, but publicly. She wasn't telling people she cheated, that she wanted a divorce, that she'd been sneaking around with a guy 10 years younger for months. No. Instead, she was positioning herself as the one being mistreated, the quiet victim of a cold, distant husband who didn't understand her. That week, I got 2 more similar calls. One from an old mutual friend, someone who used to be just as close to me as to her. Another from a mom on Mason's school committee. Both of them said things like, "We heard you two are going through a tough time. Elena said she's been feeling unsafe. She's really shaken up. I hope you're not being too hard on her." Unsafe. That word hit me like a punch. I hadn't raised my voice once. Not once. I hadn't threatened her, touched her, or even said anything harsh since the moment she confessed. I was heartbroken. Yes, angry. Sure. But not dangerous. Not even close. And yet, this version of me was now spreading like smoke in the wind. At first, I told myself it would pass. People would see through it. But then the letter came. Not a full restraining order, not yet, but a formal motion from her lawyer requesting temporary exclusive use of the home. She claimed she didn't feel emotionally safe sharing the space. She said my presence was triggering and that she needed distance to protect her mental health. My lawyer called me the second he read it. "Tell me right now if there's any truth to this," he said. "There isn't," I said. "None." He believed me. But he also warned me, this is a strategic move. She's testing the waters, seeing how much the court will let her get away with. We fought back, filed our own statements, brought in neighbor testimony, screenshots, anything we had. And we won that round barely. The judge ruled we'd stay in the house on a split schedule, alternating nights, like roommates taking shifts. But it didn't end there. The worst part? She started talking to Mason. One evening, after dinner, he came into the kitchen while I was loading the dishwasher. "Dad, are you mad at Mom?" I crouched down beside him. "Why do you ask that, buddy?" "She said you get really mad sometimes. That you scare her." I just sat there, looking at my son, and I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. My heart was pounding. I wasn't just losing a marriage. I was watching someone rewrite me in my own child's eyes. That night, I didn't sleep, because I realized this wasn't a divorce anymore. This was war. I kept thinking she couldn't sink any lower. But then she tried to destroy me for real. It started with a phone call from my attorney, one I'll never forget. "Mark," he said, "we've got a serious problem. She's filed a formal complaint alleging emotional abuse, and that Mason may be unsafe in your care." I didn't speak. I literally couldn't. For a second, my vision blurred. It was like being hit in the head with something heavy. "What?" I finally managed. That's not true." "I know," he said quickly, "but we have to treat this seriously. The system doesn't wait for the truth. If this goes the wrong way, you could lose custody. Possibly worse, depending on how far she's willing to take it." Worse? He meant charges. Investigations. The kind of stain that never really comes off, even if you're cleared later. I didn't yell. I didn't punch a wall. I just sat down in my office chair and stared at the floor for a long time, because I realized this wasn't about divorce anymore. It wasn't about two people who fell out of love. It was about power, control, revenge. She wasn't just leaving. She wanted to take everything with her and burn whatever she couldn't carry. My lawyer said her claims were vague. No hard evidence. No dates. No incidents. Just general language. Controlling, intimidating, emotional instability. All subjective, but just enough to spook a judge if they weren't paying attention. That's how it works. You don't need proof to plant doubt. We responded immediately, filed for a full psychological evaluation of both of us, offered up witnesses, neighbors, my employees, people who'd been in our home. All of them said the same thing. I was calm, steady, never abusive, never volatile. But while the legal side started moving, I felt like I was unraveling. At work, I was distracted. My phone was always buzzing. Calls from the lawyer, messages from my accountant, emails I didn't even want to open. Clients started noticing. One of them asked if I was going through something. I just smiled and said, "Yeah, family stuff." What was I supposed to say? That my wife was trying to ruin me? At home, the tension was unbearable. Elena walked around like nothing was happening, smiling for Mason, humming while she folded laundry, posting photos on Instagram like we were some happy modern co-parents. I couldn't even look at her. One night, I walked past her office and saw her FaceTiming someone. I didn't have to ask who. I heard his voice through the door. Danny, the guy she blew up our life for. And here she was, accusing me of being unstable. The next morning, I got a call from Child Protective Services. My stomach dropped when I saw the number. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. The woman on the line said she was calling to follow up on a report made about potential emotional harm to a minor. She said it was routine, that they had to investigate all reports. But I could hear it in her voice, that little edge of suspicion. Like maybe I was guilty. Like maybe the things Elena said were true. They scheduled a home visit. I cleaned the house like a man possessed, polished everything, laid out Mason's schoolwork, his drawings, his report cards, anything that showed he was happy, safe, loved. The social worker came, walked through the rooms slowly, asked gentle, pointed questions, watched me with calm, quiet eyes. And then she asked to speak to Mason, alone. That moment broke me more than anything else. Not because I was afraid of what he'd say, but because I hated that it had come to this, that my son had to be put in this position at all. When she left, she smiled politely and said she'd file her report in a few days. That was it. I spent the next week in limbo, not eating, barely sleeping, just waiting for someone to tell me whether I still got to be a father or not. Finally, the report came back, unfounded, no signs of abuse, no reason for concern. Mason told her he felt safe with me, that we play together, that I help with homework, that I read to him every night, that I never yell. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was rage. She'd tried to take my son from me. She'd tried to stain my name, forever. And she'd done it with a straight face. That's when something inside me changed. I stopped hoping she'd be reasonable. I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. I started preparing for war. The first court date was just paperwork. We showed up in separate cars. She wore white. Of course she did. Hair perfect, soft expression. Like this was a sad little formality and not the brutal knife fight. It was already becoming behind the scenes. We didn't speak that morning. She sat on one side of the room with her lawyer. I sat on the other with mine. When the clerk read our names, Elena and Mark Williams, I felt this strange twist in my stomach. Like the sound of us being listed as two separate people suddenly made everything feel more real. The judge glanced through our files, asked a few basic questions, then set the next hearing. No big rulings yet, just formalities. But it still felt like something sacred had cracked open. At home, things were unbearable. We were still living under the same roof. Separate rooms, separate routines, but same space. That was the court's temporary living arrangement. Neither of us had been ordered to leave, and she refused to go voluntarily. Claimed it would destabilize Mason. Said it was his house too. So we moved through the house like ghosts. Cold, civil, avoiding eye contact. Every meal was quiet. Every shared hallway a silent standoff. Mason noticed. I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked between us, like waiting for something to explode. He stopped asking certain questions. Started spending more time in his room. He still smiled, still played, but the light was dimmer, like a kid walking through fog. We tried to act normal for his sake, but you can't fake warmth when it's gone. You can't fake family when the foundation's already split down the middle. The legal battle picked up speed fast. Her lawyer pushed for primary custody, claimed Mason thrived most in Elena's care, brought up her role as a stay-at-home mom, downplayed my involvement, said I was often absent, focused on work, less engaged in the day-to-day. My attorney hit back with facts. School pickups I did, weekend trips, my schedule flexibility, testimonies from teachers and our nanny, who said I was hands-on, involved, reliable. Then came the financials. She wanted a piece of everything, the business, the properties, the accounts. Even with the prenup, they argued that she contributed emotionally to my success, that her support as a spouse should entitle her to more than the agreement allowed. They tried to go after assets I'd acquired before we even met. We countered, document by document, dated contracts, tax records, proof of purchase. It was like dissecting my life one receipt at a time. And through it all, Elena never blinked. She showed up to every hearing with that same calm, almost gentle demeanor, spoke softly, rehearsed lines, told the court she was deeply saddened by the breakdown of our marriage, that she only wanted what was fair. Fair. I kept thinking about that word every time she smiled at the judge. Was it fair when she lied to Mason? Was it fair when she tried to paint me as dangerous? Was it fair when she called CPS on the father of her child over nothing? She sat there, composed, but I saw her eyes. I knew her tells. The little jot which when she was annoyed, the way she fiddled with her ring finger even though she hadn't worn the band in months. She knew what she was doing, and she knew exactly how much it was hurting me. Still, I stayed quiet, followed my lawyer's advice. No outbursts, no drama, just facts. Because this wasn't just about money, this was about Mason. And no matter what tricks she pulled, I wasn't letting her win that part of the war. The night before the final hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat alone in the living room, lights off, just the soft hum of the refrigerator somewhere in the background. Mason was asleep upstairs. I checked on him 3 times already. He had no idea what tomorrow meant, no clue that the judge was about to decide the course of his childhood. I felt calm, not relaxed, just still. Like everything that could have been done had already been done. The fight was over. All that remained was the outcome. But I knew Elena wasn't done fighting, not by a long shot. When we walked into the courtroom the next morning, I saw it in her face. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't defeated. She was furious. Her jaw was tight. She didn't greet her lawyer, just sat down with her arms crossed, her foot tapping uncontrollably. I didn't say a word to her, but I could feel the heat coming off her like a furnace. It wasn't the face of a woman who came to settle. It was the face of someone who came to punish. We both knew this was the final round. The courtroom was quiet, sterile. No spectators this time, just us, the attorneys, and the judge. A man in his 60s, steady voice, no nonsense. I liked him. He didn't care about drama. He cared about facts. He began reading his findings. No emotion, Just a list of conclusions, piece by piece. He addressed custody first. Based on Mason's testimony, school records, the CPS report, and statements from third parties, including his teacher and our old nanny, the judge ruled that I would receive full physical custody. Elena would get scheduled visitation on alternating weekends, with 1 week in the summer and split holidays. When he said the words, I didn't move. Elena didn't either, at first, but I could feel her eyes boring into the side of my head, like she was daring me to look at her. I didn't. I kept my focus forward. The judge continued. Joint legal custody was granted, meaning she'd still be involved in decisions about Mason's education and health care, but day-to-day parenting? That was mine now. I was named primary custodian. Mason would stay in his home, at his school, surrounded by everything familiar. Then came the property and financial rulings. And this is where she lost it. The judge confirmed that our prenup was valid, fully enforceable. And because she had initiated divorce on grounds of infidelity and false claims, with no proven contribution to the business or assets, everything remained mine. Every house, every property, the business, the accounts. She'd get a modest settlement to cover the years she stayed home, fair under the state guidelines, and the condo I had bought in her name back when we were newlyweds. But everything else? Mine. When the judge finished, there was silence. Heavy silence. Then Elena laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. You've got to be kidding me, she said, breaking the quiet. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is there a question, Mrs. Williams? She didn't answer him. She turned to her lawyer. What the hell was the point of this, then? You told me. Her lawyer tried to calm her down, but she was already leaning forward, toward me. This is your idea of justice? She snapped. You cheat emotionally for years with your business while I raise our child, and now I walk away with scraps? I turned and looked at her for the first time all morning. You didn't raise him alone, I said, quietly. And you didn't leave because you were neglected. You left for a personal trainer with a six-pack and no job. Her eyes burned. You made me feel invisible. You were so obsessed with your empire, you didn't even notice me disappearing. Until you disappeared with someone else, I said. The judge cleared his throat. Enough. This is not a space for personal arguments. You've both had your time. But she wasn't done. She stood up. This system protects men like him. Cold, controlling, quiet manipulators. You all see the calm exterior and assume that makes him the better parent. That makes him safe. Her lawyer whispered something urgently. She ignored him. I just stood there and took it, because I knew lashing out now would only hand her one last victory. The judge finally cut her off. You're free to appeal this ruling if you disagree with it, Mrs. Williams, he said. But in this courtroom, the case is now closed. That was it. He stood, nodded once, and left. The gavel never dropped. There was no cinematic ending. Just people gathering their papers and walking out like it was any other Tuesday morning. But for me, it felt like the end of a war. We walked out of the courtroom in silence. No words between us. Just that same thick air we'd been breathing for months. She veered off toward the elevator without a glance back, her lawyer trailing behind, clearly trying to talk her down. And me? I stepped outside into the sunlight. It didn't feel like triumph. Not really. It felt like surviving a fire. I'd kept my son. I'd kept my name. I'd kept what I'd built. But I'd lost something too. Not just the marriage. That was already dead. No. I'd lost the version of myself that believed people don't turn on you like that. That if you do right by someone, they won't try to burn your life down. I went home that night, and Mason ran up to me as soon as I walked through the door. Dad, he yelled. You're back early. I picked him up, held him close. I'm not going anywhere, buddy, I whispered. Not ever. He smiled, then pulled back and said, Can we have pancakes for dinner? I laughed. Yeah. You know what? Let's do it. That night we made pancakes with too much syrup and watched a movie on the couch. Just me and him. No courtrooms. No lawyers. No lies. Just us. And it hit me, quietly, this was the start of something new. Not perfect, not how I planned, but peaceful. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.